All right, I'll start with the introductions, and maybe a few more people will trickle in or not. But this isn't really me. So yeah, welcome to Injecting Reacting to your authoring experience. Just want to let you know these slides will be in a PDF form. I'll send out links to the talk description on the website as well on the Slack channel. And that will be out there later, probably by the end of the day, or the latest end of the weekend. But just want to start off with that. First of all, I just want to start off with who I am. My name is Pete Inge. I work as a tech lead at Bluecadet here in Philly. My contact is the email address right there, pinge@bluecadet.com if you want to reach out. Feel free to reach out over the Slack channel as well. And however, most of the social media stuff, I don't usually respond to people, just I don't use the social media stuff as much. But yeah, best way to contact me would be email or that Slack channel. Again, this repo, the link will be in the description, but this repo is on GitHub, and I will eventually have a PDF of all the slides if you're interested in that. My experience, I used to freelance a little over about 10 years, did a lot of web development. I did a lot of work with Drupal 5 on up to current, and currently I'm at Bluecadet about 4.5 years right now. Overall, as a developer, what really got me into developing, I love solving problems and trying to figure out how to solve a problem. So that was a big reason why I like programming and how I get into code. And when I get into code, I just problem solving is the best part. I don't usually like putting it into production, but getting those problems solved, that's kind of my background a little bit. And as I mentioned, I work for Bluecadet. We were established in 2007. Emmy award-winning digital agency that creates world-class websites, mobile apps, interactive installations, and immersive environments. We partner with a lot of mission-driven organizations to create a broad suite of products and environments, really embracing design and technology and all of these things. A lot of that, the content is driven by CMSs one way or the other, whether it's a website or one of these installations. And just overall, just kind of a side note, we don't really consider ourselves a Drupal or a WordPress or any specific CMS shop. We do try to use the right tool for the right job. Also, clients might have an opinion one way or the other. With all that said, though, majority of the work that we do is Drupal and WordPress. Most likely for the next, little while, I don't see that really changing based on what people are familiar with and comfortable with, and just what we're able to do with those CMSs. That's just that side note. So next, who is this talk for? Well, first, moderate to advanced coders, we're really going to get into some code and what's going on in the back end. So if you're moderate advanced coder, you'll hopefully get a little bit of what's going on. But really, anyone interested in customizing Drupal, I'm a firm believer in customizing Drupal as much as you can. Oops, I thought there was another one. But really, anyone, if you're interested in the admin experience and that type of thing, this is really a good way to get started in here. So yeah, let me get moving on the next slide. Sorry, I was just checking, see if there was a question. I thought it looked like there was a question. Oh yeah, and to be honest, we'll open up questions at the end. So if you have questions, type them in the chat here, send them up there. But we'll hopefully have time at the end here to get through questions and discussion. So to get started, first of all, why are we dealing with this issue? Why, hopefully this attracted you for one reason or the other. And I'm going to start off with Drupal's admin experience is, and if we were in a room, I'd have you shout out your experiences with the Drupal admin. But overall, I would say not good. I could have a couple other things here. It is what it is. But we have to ask ourselves why. Why is it this way? It's because Drupal is inherently bad. Is the underlying architecture of the Drupal bad? If we think about forms and how all that works and everything, well, I would argue no. I think Drupal actually, for what it is and the LAMP stack and PHP and everything, I think it's pretty good, a really good solution. But we'll get into this. A good admin experience has to be designed, opinionated, and purposeful. This is really hard to do in any system that tries to be everything for everyone. And Drupal, as an open source project, I really believe that it is trying to be everything for everyone, which creates a lot of problems. But it's serving its community the way it should be. And especially when we get into the complex data structures, we're dealing with things that you just really can't cover trying to be an open source project the way it is. But can it be done? I think so. I think yes. Should it be done? Yes, Drupal is making strides to address these issues. There's the admin UI and JavaScript modernization group. They are doing some stuff. As with Drupal, though, I'm curious if and when stuff is going to come out and how much of an improvement it's going to be. Not a bash by any means. I'm just curious what's actually going to happen and when. But part of the problem is, as developers, our projects are right now. We need to get stuff out for our clients, and we need to work on these things. So what steps can we take now? Again, as I was saying, I believe developers we should be developing. That's our job. We shouldn't necessarily have to click buttons and configure Drupal to be a perfect site for these complex sites. So what steps can we take now? And this is why we're getting into this talk. So first of all, let's just address a little bit of Drupal's architecture and what we're going to be looking at. Overall, we have entities. Everything goes back to the entity model with Drupal. Drupal content entities have fields to them. And with fields, we have three things that define a field. We have three plugins specifically. We have the field plugin, which defines the data structure. These are very loose definitions, by the way, so just take that for what it is. The field plugin defines the data structure. The field widget plugin defines the data entry, and the field formatter plugins define how we want to display that data. So today's talk, we're specifically looking at field widgets, and we're talking about React and solving a bigger problem. This really doesn't matter a whole lot about React. It's the process that we're using to solve a problem. You can use other things to deal with this. We actually do in Bluecadet, we do a lot of our own custom widgets and formatters just to help with this admin experience and the front end of the display of this content. But today in this talk specifically, we'll be looking at the field widgets. Sorry, grabbing a quick drink. So if you've seen this page on the right, this is the form display page in the back end of Drupal. This specific node has a number of fields to it, and we have, with this widget column, we have the ability to pick what widget we're using to input the data here. And from Drupal.org, field API widgets specify how fields are displayed in edit forms. That's very profound. But just for a simple example, to enter in, we can have a select list versus checkbox or radio to change up how we're inputting certain parts of data. If you have the select list, it probably means you have a large list of content that handles that a little bit better than maybe checkboxes. Radios or checkboxes for multi or single value inputs kind of handles that pretty nicely. So we have these options here. And then let's go to the next slide. On the node edit form, Drupal inherently does not care about how the data gets in. It just needs the data using a widget. That's how Drupal works. It uses a widget. And this really opens up the world of possibilities to us. As I was saying, as developers, we should develop. We should be able to develop what we want and how we want it. So this opens up, again, a world of possibilities to us by the ability of having as many widgets as we want. So today, what are we going to look at? Well, first of all, I'm not going to be going too in depth with the actual React side of things. I personally am not a React developer, and I've played with things. I've made a couple things, but I'm sure if you look at my React code, you would probably tear it apart. We are going to bounce around a little bit in some windows, so sorry about that. If we hopefully won't have any problems with that. But we first are going to look at just a single field React widget in Drupal, and then we're going to move on to kind of a complex data structure React widget. So the first one is just one field, one widget. The second one deals with what could be split up over multiple fields, paragraph, bundles, entities, whatever you want to consider. Ours is just kind of a multi-field example that we'd be looking at. So when we were thinking about this, the first project that we were working on was a couple years ago. We just wanted to prove that we could inject React into a node edit form, and that was basically what we're going on. We've been working on a project for a while now with the Henry Ford Museum. We have a number of installations and a mobile app for their site, and this has been a multi-phase project over the past couple of years. And the first thing, we knew we were going to have some complex data entry issues. So our first project, we just wanted to work on how do we get React in there. So I'm going to show you what we did. if I can get the window open, there we go. So this is a proof of concept. This is a simple test node that we're looking at, and we wanted to add a slider on a number field. So this top field right here is the normal Drupal float number field. We put a limit on it from 0 to 25. We have a field prefix and a field suffix. And then the next two fields are, this first one's another float field using the React widget, and the second one is an integer field using the React widget. The first one does have the prefix and the suffix. The second one has the prefix. I was just trying to get all these options in the React widget itself that we have in the normal one. So as you can see, it works pretty nice here. This goes by integers. We don't worry about the float numbers. And it works pretty well. And one of the things that we can think about with this, the normal Drupal field, I enter in a number that's outside of the range. At first, I can continue onto the field and I don't get any kind of warning or anything like that until I hit save, and now I get the error, which is nice that we get it at that point, but still there's nothing locking us into this. So one of the questions that we think about is why would we want this? Well, it helps content entry. By having a slider, I can't get out of range. I specifically made this field read only, so I can't type in a number in there. So this right there, the slider kind of helps us with that part of the data entry. So yeah, again, it was proof of concept, and just instead of trying to reload pages and all that kind of stuff, I just have all the tabs open. This is a quick display of that data. It all looks the same. Again, this second field, we didn't have a suffix, so that is intentional, but it worked. So I was actually pleasantly surprised. It went a little bit quicker than I thought. Initially, I set aside, I think, 2 days to figure this problem out, and by lunch on the first day, I think I had this working, pretty much working, and I was pleasantly surprised that it went as quickly as it did. So the next, we are going to dive into the code. I just want to show you what we're going to look at first before diving into the code. We're going to look at a little bit of the field widget plugin itself, the actual class to create that, how we add a custom theme into it, and the library to get all of our React components in there. We'll look at the module file itself for the module, and what the two functions that we'll be doing to work on that, and then the React component itself and what we need to do to get it all to work in Drupal. So let me slip over to the code. And so we have two modules. The first one is just this proof of concept. Second module, just in this code base here, is what we used in production. So that's why we have that. But if you're familiar with Drupal modules, the structure should not be too crazy for you. We have our source directory and everything that we have in there. We have a templates, which we have our template file, our .info file to handle our, what we need for a module, our libraries, and our module file. So let's look at the widget file first. So again, if you're going to have a field widget, you need to have it in this directory structure. And we look at the top of the class here, we have the annotation to create the field widget plugin, ID. The field types here is important. Which fields types does this work on? So we have float and integer field types. In the beginning of this class, sorry, yeah, no questions. So at the beginning of this class, there's a couple settings forms, all that kind of stuff. Nothing crazy. We are doing the placeholder in here. We won't necessarily get into all that. I recommend anytime you're doing this kind of stuff, look at the base widgets or the base plugins, basically, that Drupal creates themselves. Great examples to see what's going on, how Drupal itself is doing it, and either extend or start from scratch on your own. This, I believe, most of this is copy and pasted from the number widget field, Core's number widget field. I'm not sure, this was done 2 years ago, so I'm not sure why I just didn't extend that, and I'm only extending the base. Most of the stuff that I do right now, I usually, if I'm doing like a number field, I'll extend the number field widget and go from there. So if we look at the actual form element itself, this method is creating the actual form element. The two things to note here are we are adding our own theme, which if you're familiar with Drupal's theming, we're kind of extending it off of the input number theme. Not necessarily totally important, but just wanted to note that. And then second, we're adding a library here. So we've created a library in this module, and now we'll bring in our JavaScript and our CSS that we need for the React component itself. Again, most of this stuff down here is boilerplate number stuff that's being handled, decimals, floats, min, max. We're doing a little bit with the prefix and suffix, changing it up a little bit with how Drupal normally handles it. Drupal normally, wraps it around the complete field. So when you only have one input, that's fine. To get it into the React, we want to actually inject the prefix and the suffix into the React component itself and put it where we want. So that's really the only thing I'm messing with. But we had to redo a little bit. I left the comments here so we could see what we're doing. Again, not too complex. Wanted to show the theme and the library. Now, if we, sorry, let me just jump over here because I have notes. If we jump into the module file itself, again, this isn't it's not a big file, not a whole lot going on. We are defining our new theme, and as I mentioned earlier, our base hook is the input. So we get some preprocess functions and all that handled just by adding that in there. We don't have to do a whole lot of that. And if we move down, this is our hook preprocess input. So we're looking for this actual themed input. And we're doing a couple things. For this specific example, we only really needed to do the prefix and suffix. Again, I'm adding it into the React component, and I'll show you that in a sec when we get there. The next thing is to look at the template file. So if we go to the template file, this is now our template file for the actual input. If you notice here, the base input template is found here, core modules, system templates, input.html.twig. What's normally in that file is just simply the input element, attributes, and then the children afterwards. So we simply just changing it up to be a div, so React can do its thing with it. We are adding the normal attributes that we're getting, and then we've added a unique class just so I can target it for React. This could be added in the pre-process, it could be added in the template. Looking back, I probably should have added it in the pre-process, so it always gets in there. Someone overwrites the template in the class there. That could happen, but this isn't in production. And then we'll go to React. Oh, sorry, libraries. So here, again, if you're familiar with libraries, this shouldn't be anything too crazy. We're just adding our JavaScript that's been compiled from React and our main.css file. That's all been created through the React. Now we have a React folder, and pretty much I have everything that I would normally do from create React app in this folder. If you're dealing with stuff for production, this is probably isn't the best way of doing it. You probably just want your build folder or just the static JavaScript and CSS in the build folder somewhere. That's a little bit of an architecture question to take outside of here. But we want to show you a little bit of what's going on. Our source, the two main files are our index.js file. This file, again, normal React, it's looking for that element to replace and replacing it here with the actual React component. Again, this wasn't anything crazy, so it's still named app. And then we go to the app file. And again, there's a lot of stuff going on here. This was created 2 years ago, so I think there's some stuff that probably should be updated from it if we wanted to reuse it, but it is what it is. The main thing, though, this is the markup that's being replaced or being used in the form. And the main part right here that we need to look at is this input field. It's using the ID and the name that would normally be used on the input field. And that's really, we're submitting an HTML form. That's really all that Drupal needs to know, and it's getting its value. So as long as we have this input, we are golden, we're good to go. We could hide this input. I chose to make it read-only and show it, but within our actual form, if we look at that again, it's that input field sitting right here has the prefix and the suffix, has the slider below it. I chose to have it there so we could see the value. We can also see the tooltip value. You could design this a little bit differently, but that takes care of just this simple widget. And again, as I mentioned, I thought this was going to take a little bit more to hook all of these things up. There is a little bit of hooking up. Drupal, every little thing is in a different file and all that kind of stuff. But if you follow the path, it's pretty straightforward. It just takes a little bit of time to get your head around that exact path. So this specific example, really could be done in plain JavaScript. It's just a slider. It's nothing too crazy, but it was pretty good. So again, just to recap that, we have the field widget plugin. We added a custom theme. We added a library. We have the .module file, which defines that new theme. For the input element, we pre-process that input element to get all our settings and everything into the actual React app, our React component, and then we have the React component, which includes the input element that we need for Drupal form submission. Okay, so what about complex data? Excuse me. But yeah, what about complex data or multi fields? Or this is really the next challenge that we wanted to deal with. And with the Henry Ford THF specifically, hopefully this video comes across the thing right. But we have artifacts and we have concepts. Now we have tons and tons of artifacts. Henry Ford Museum, pretty massive to begin with. And then we're making these chains. So we have an artifact and it's chained to a concept, which is chained to an artifact, which is chained to a concept. If you think about like 6 degrees of separation of Kevin Bacon, that kind of stuff, that's what we're trying to create. We're trying to create, we call them hero networks in the backend and what we're working with. So if you see this video playing, we're showing some of that stuff up. Not all of it is. That right there is one of the hero networks. And again, it's a pretty large data set. We were trying to figure out, do we do this with the React component as we're trying to work on and try to figure out, or how do we do this in Drupal itself? To be honest with you, initially, I don't know how we would have done it in Drupal. It would have been a little bit interesting. Couple fields, probably would have our own custom JavaScript to handle some of everything, some of how to validate which artifact connects to which concept, and vice versa. And it's just a large data set. If we did that in Drupal and how Drupal Ajaxes, it would take a long time, I think, to fill out that form. It would get a little annoying, and there would definitely be a lot of Ajaxing. So let's look at what we ended up coming up with, and then we'll get into the code. Here we go. So we're going to create one of these things, and so yeah, these are called hero networks. Again, we're chaining artifacts to concepts, and then to artifact to concept. This is a normal node edit form. We have our title. This is a normal text field in Drupal, the subtitle here. And then everything under widget data is actually part of the React component. This hero statement is simply a text field, but we added it into the React widget. I think we had a little misunderstanding to begin with, and this changed a little bit, but it's in the React component. It could be a text field. It might not be a text field. It is what it is. And now we get into this actual chaining here. So we have a list of all of our artifacts. We can search our artifacts, and I can choose the artifact I need. And then a list of concepts pop up, and I can click on a concept. I can, search more artifacts. And again, I get my list of, and I can keep going through this whole list. And if you notice here, this is pretty quick. In the time that I'm building out this whole list, it would probably be one Ajax load with normal Drupal Ajaxing. So now I have this whole list, all of these artifacts chained together, and concepts, and yeah, it's there, it's ready to go. So it's quick. It creates a more of a pleasant experience for the content author. They can get in here, they can enjoy what they're doing rather than waiting for Drupal. Or I know one thing that happens for me is I try to go through too quickly, and once Drupal finishes Ajaxing, it like resets the form to that initial state. So if I had text, or I tried to click something else, then it would get confused and go back. So we're dealing with that. So let's save that note. So we'll save that. Great. Got timed out. Hopefully this works. Hey, there we go. And now this is just a front end. This is a headless site, so we don't really have much of a front end to it. It's just helping out our content editors. So yeah, it's all there. Again, we have a custom display for this to show this chaining. But what are we doing? How do we come to figure out how to create this? Well, as we were sitting down, we really were trying to think, what do we have available to do with all of this? And two things really popped out of this. First of all, when we're dealing with React, we're dealing with React state. There's an object, and that's how React rebuilds. When you change the state, it rebuilds and does its whole thing. But it's all off of this one object, and we can save that object to JSON. The second step is we have a handy little hook in Drupal for hook node pre-save. So before I save a node, I can do whatever I want to that node. And yeah, I can save things, I can move things around, grab data out of it. So if you look at this front end, you can see there's this thing that's called, it's labeled widget data, and then this is just the JSON string. Now these are the IDs of the artifact and the concepts. Concepts first, artifacts. We ended up not saving the artifacts and concepts in the Drupal site, so these aren't node IDs. These are IDs of their actual THF's actual artifact database. The text would have been saved here if I had added text, but this is just the JSON data. And what this allows us to do is, on the initial load of a node add page, we don't have any information, so we just load the app. It's great, it's fine. But our initial concern is, well, what happens when we edit a node? We have to get that data from multiple fields into that React app and have the React app start, initiate with that data. So by being able to save this JSON data, I can inject that data into the React component on the node edit form. So then the next step is, well, what happens, if these were entity references, or I need these numbers, or I want to do something, I want to create a view of this data. What do I do with this stuff now? And how do I get that out of that JSON object? Well, we can easily do something with what I mentioned before, the hook node pre-save. I can process the string and grab those IDs and save them to fields. So if we look at just kind of our field list on this content type, we have artifact concept and this statement field, and then we have widget data. So what I'm doing is I'm creating this React component only on this widget data field, which is just a text plain field. And then when we save the node, I'll show this all on code in just a minute here, but when we save this entity, when we save the form, we're now pulling the data out of this field widget and inserting them into these fields. So now I can do whatever I normally want to do with Drupal with this data, again, with views or anything like that. It needs these fields. It needs these number fields or this text field, or not needs, but it's just easier to work with if we have it in the normal fields that we want. And yeah, that was the main thing I want to show with this. So let's move on to the next slide. Again, we could use preprocessed node. Actually, sorry, let me jump into the code before I get into this slide. That was a little out of order. So we have two React components in here. So just wanted to state that before we get too far into code. Source. We have a hero network and how moment. We'll look at the hero network. Again, for this form element, we are using this theme input hero network, and then we're attaching the library. We did have a setting as far as like max connections. That was just more of a proof of concept. Again, can we do our own custom settings? And this one we did. So in our actual settings form here, manage form display, I can set my max connections. So we might want, so here we're doing 11 connections. I might only want 3. And that's the connections, artifact to concept to artifact, blah, 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 blah. Let's get back to the code. So that's the widget itself. If we go into the module, there's a lot more in this file than the initial proof of concept. But as you can see, we have the theme, the new theme defined. And in here, we are doing a couple things. This one, we're not, following from the input, the number field. So we are doing a couple things as far as IDs, names, and values, making sure that all that works, and setting this max connections. And I'll get in the node pre-save in just a moment. And our templates, again, are pretty similar. We're adding a couple little things in here, a couple extra classes, but that's, doesn't really matter too much. And then the hero network, someone else did this, Ryan Johnson, used to work with us, and he was the actual one who developed the React app. And if we get in here, hero network, yeah, so there's a lot more going on here. I didn't do it. But we after all the stuff that's going on to create all that searching and filtering and all this kind of stuff, we do just have our input field, and it's a text field, and it has the kind of the data all in a JSON object itself. So that's here, and then we're going to get into the module file. So here we go. On the node pre-save, what we're doing is we're taking the value of that field and decoding it. We now have the string and the numbers of those lists. And we're just saving them to those fields. Now, I have those fields to work with. I can do whatever I want with. And again, this was, I thought there'd be a little bit more. Initially, I thought there'd be a little bit more, figuring out how to grab data and move it all around. It is a little bit of repetitive data. We have data kind of saved in two places. But I feel like this really solves an overall problem with simply one additional field. So basically, kind of one field managing three other fields, but the benefits totally outweigh the cost of that one field. We are using a hook preprocessed node here, and it's just how we are displaying this data on the front end. Nothing too crazy going on there. So let's hide that again and get back to our slide deck. So yeah, just as I mentioned, the hook preprocessed node, this is not necessarily a necessary field. We're using it to transform that data into what we want to see on the front end. For this specific example, to get all of that data into the React component, we are using a custom API endpoint for that data. It's heavily cached. The first initial load, a cold load, does take a little bit of time to get that page going, but it's cached for a decent amount of time. If you're adding 10 of these in, the first one you'll notice it, but then after that you should be fine. So that is something to note and take a look at. So again, we looked at the field widget plugin, we add that custom theme, added the library. The module file, we are defining a new element input theme. We're pre-processing that input element, and we're including that input on the React component itself. So hopefully all of that made a little bit of sense, and you can take this back to your to work and everything. But where do we go from here? What does this mean for us? Well, as I mentioned earlier, I think developers should develop. I think we should be customizing Drupal as much as we can for our clients, for our specific projects. Configuring only gets us so far, and I think that's okay. Again, Drupal as a core thing needs to cater to everyone, and so it can't cover everything. So there's some stuff that we really should customize. So that's just the philosophy where I come from when it comes to a lot of these things, Drupal, WordPress, or any of these CMSs. But there are a couple things to think about. Better entity browsers. I'm sure media entity browsers. It's a great module. It's slow. It's a little clunky. There's a lot to Drupal's admin experience that I believe is just old and clunky. This is one of them. Paragraphs interface. Again, this is another thing. How does a admin pick the paragraph they want and the content they want? Can they add it before or after another paragraph? I think this has a lot of potential. Recurring dates is a field I've been using for the past couple of projects, and all the field widgets are a little, in my opinion, a little annoying and a little buggy as well. They've improved a lot recently, but there's some potential here for creating a nice little React component. A hotspot picker. If you look at see this video going on, this is an interactive we did a few years ago, and there's an image, and then there's what we call hotspots that you can choose. Now, you could hard code where that hotspot is, but then you can never change the image, the underlying image. So we do have a hotspot picker. Initially, we did this for the admin experience. We did a custom JavaScript. I think it's just jQuery, normal Drupal stuff. But we could have a pretty cool looking interface if we wanted to create these hotspot pickers through React. And really, as I was thinking about this, there's very few, global things I could really think of, but I can name, at least one thing in every project that I really could work on to improve that project for that client. And I really, hopefully, as you're thinking about this inspires you a little bit to, think about your own projects. What could we improve a little bit? What is really annoying for content authors? Some of these, it could just be simply branding, and you have certain elements. Again, one of these things that just keeps popping out of my mind are these like radial type things and sliders. It might just be branding purposes. It might be I used to work with audio and that kind of stuff. So like an audio dial, like on a mixing board, like that makes sense to me. And that might be something nice that's in your project. You might want to do that. So really, I think a lot of it comes down. A lot of the stuff that you can do is customized to a specific project, and I think that's a good thing. And really, the sky is the limit. Oh, again, just wanted to say this is not locked into React. This doesn't have to be React components. We can use a lot of different things for these field widgets if we wanted to. Widgets in general are pretty powerful. So yeah, that was hopefully not necessarily in a nutshell, but a lot. So we want to open it up to questions, comments, and discussions right now. And I think we're going to open up the mics as we get into this, or I'll look at the questions list if you have any questions. And just to let you know, the mics are open, it sounds like. So if you're not answering a question, I think you're muted again. And feel free to go into Slack, and we can ask questions there if something comes up later. But yeah, we'll wait a couple more minutes here if anybody else has any questions or thoughts.
Yeah, you have like 12 minutes for questions. That's a lot.
Yeah.
What's the most common problem you've run into when adding React to your admin interface?
The most common problem dealing with Node. Yeah, sorry. So we've done it just a few times. We're not doing it every week in that sense. But really there's very few. I tried to update this widget. So I did the first widget 2 years ago, and I couldn't update the widget. It took me like half a day because of the Node dependencies and versioning and all that kind of fun stuff. So if you're used to Node and all of that, that can be a pain when you just try. It was developed 2 years ago. It should have just idea of package management. It should just work again, but it doesn't. So there's that problem. And I would we don't version control those build files. So dealing with some of that stuff, if I were to package this up for a production site, I would package and commit those build files. I'm trying to think what else. Again, saving everything in that state object really kind of helps because we can just reload that app, that component, and as I make updates, I might have to make updates to that object. That we haven't done that yet, but that could be a potential problem if we're saving that state object in that field. We update the component and need to make like changes to that hierarchy. That would have to get tested and worked out pretty well. We haven't had too many major issues, to be honest. We haven't done paragraphs. That'd be one thing I would like to look into. I think there'd be a lot more issues with that. Dealing with paragraphs and the entity revision field. That's something we haven't dealt with in React. I'd like to work on that. But again, I think most of that could be done in that preprocess function to deal with all of the revisions and saving and all of that kind of stuff. I hope that answers your question a little bit.
So we have a project where we have basically a busload of paragraphs that people can put on pages in random orders and things.
Yes.
And one of the annoying things that I have found is that it's just hard to pick the thing that you want off the list because the list is so long.
Yes. Yes.
What would be your, if you had time to do something about that
Yeah.
and could convince your stakeholder that it was worth tackling,
For sure.
how would you tackle that problem?
I would, to be honest with you, that like it's a design thing, a admin experience thing. I would really sit down with the designer and be like, how can we improve this? Is it nesting what those things are? Is it, you know, prompting people to go through a certain process to be able to pick what they want? You know, initially we used the drop down list for paragraphs, and now we've been doing the modal because we have so many paragraph bundles in some projects. And even that, to me, it's a little bit of an improvement. But I still don't necessarily like it. Are you? I think, you know, can you group some of those paragraph bundles into the types? You know, we do a lot of like, we'll have like a wrapper type of paragraph, which you can then choose the paragraphs inside of it. So maybe, you know, being able to group some of those, just you know, helping that admin experience. I think, yeah, a lot of it, you know, you might ask the question of like, what would you want an admin to do? Are they, you know, choosing it through a workflow? What kind of content do you want, or is it just being able to visually present those paragraphs in a better way? Yeah, off the top of my head, I like the idea of having the modal for all of those items, but yeah, being able to shorten that list or make visual cues for that list are two of my ideas. I'm not an admin experience expert by any means. Are there examples of this code? Sorry, if hopefully that answered your question, or at least something along. One thing to say is that these React components can be completely developed outside of Drupal and the Drupal sphere. You know, as long as they're saving their state to that state object, you know, the JSON object, JSON string, it can be completely developed outside of Drupal, and you know, it doesn't care anything about Drupal. And I can take that data, and so if you have someone who solves that problem for you in a good way, it doesn't matter what's going on with Drupal itself. So are there examples of the code somewhere we can look at later? Yes, I put the link to the GitHub repo, and that has these two modules in it. Feel free to take a look at those. Do you run into a difficult build process when you have lots of React apps living all over the code base? Yes and no. And I think, you know, if you do have multiple options, you need to work on your own build flow for this. Whether it's, you know, I would recommend probably, you know, building it and committing those build files to your actual project repo and having your individual React component in a repo somewhere else. We don't have a project that we have like 50 of these going on at the same time. So it hasn't caused a major issue with this at the moment. As I mentioned, I tried to build the one that was about 2 years old, and I ran into a lot of problems. And if that had been in CI, I would have had to update that over the past 2 years rather than, you know, committing our build files. I don't see any other questions at the moment, but I'll chill here for another minute. Again, you know, we can use the Slack. You can Slack me directly or Slack me in the actual talk channel as well if you're curious. And I will hopefully by the end of the day add the PDF to that repo, but the repo links I'll add to the channel in Slack as soon as we're done with the talk. Thanks again, everybody. Thanks for the moderator, Stan. Thanks for CMS Philly and all the organizers. This has been an interesting process dealing with all the remote and virtual conference stuff. So thanks, everyone. Appreciate all of that.
Yes, thank you, Pete. Yeah, we appreciate it. Thank you for coming to present today. It was very informative.
Yeah, hopefully you enjoyed it and got some good things out of it.
Yeah, don't forget to check out Slack. He's gonna upload files later.
Yes, yeah.
GitHub, yeah.
Like there are a couple things in there. Yep. Okay. I'll take a look at that. Great. All right. I hope everyone has a great day. And I guess there's one more session for today. Enjoy the rest of the conference.